Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention, maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back. Got a pretty interesting guest here for you today. A gentleman by the name of Roleigh Martin, who has written this very interesting book called The Forgotten Half of the Patent Clause. It's not published yet, but it's a pretty deep and lengthy tome which explains how one part of our Constitution has been sort of abandoned and created a situation where cars and trucks and various other equipment and consumer goods are fantastically and ridiculously expensive, and how that's a drag on the economy and sort of anti-American insofar as because we've abandoned this part of the Constitution, we've granted a sort of oligopoly to a number of manufacturers who face no competition from the open market that the founders of this country envisioned. You get 20 years for a patent, and that's that in the original formulation. And now they get it forever. And in conjunction with the capricious and wicked regulatory state we live under, it's impossible to remanufacture patent expired equipment. Roleigh goes into great detail about all of this and suggests a remedy, which I think you guys will be interested in hearing, and I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of Roleigh's idea? What do you think of all of this? What do you think of the possibility of, a resurgence in American manufacturing, in part built on the ability of people and groups to get together and build patent-expired older vehicles, but brand new? I think that would be a great thing. There's a lot of us online who complain about this. There's a lot of, you go to a car show, you go to a truck show, and it's always the older equipment that's on display. It's always the cool old cars that people desperately wish they could buy again. But we are legally prevented from buying newly minted versions of those very items. And Roleigh's book explains how we can get back there and possibly make that happen. Please send me an email if you think me or Roleigh are wrong or you want to add to the conversation. Gordylocks@protonmail.com. If you enjoy this conversation, spread it around. I'm going to send it to all my car and truck guys and various sort of lawyers and thinkers I know. I really want to get as much feedback on this as I can because I think the idea is pretty novel, but it's also got a pretty monumental hill to climb because the forces that extract so much value from our society from the lack of competition, like so many other forces, are not going to go quietly. Like I say, I think Roleigh's idea is very interesting, and I'd love to hear from you what your thoughts are on it. Roleigh has asked me to write a foreword for his book because he was pretty impressed with mine. If you haven't yet, go get yourself a copy of End of the Road, Inside the War on Truckers. My project and Roleigh's project overlap in a couple of places, and I'm looking forward to writing that forward for him and seeing his book published. I'm not sure who's going to do it. It's pretty hefty, a pretty specific type of book, but hopefully it gets out the door soon and you guys can all read it. All right, let's get on to the show, shall we? Mr. Roleigh Martin. All right, g'day everybody. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Voice of Gord podcast. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. The other voice you're about to hear today is a very interesting fellow I've come across. You know how the algorithms work. Sometimes they bring you slop, sometimes they bring you a real one, and this guy's a real one. Lifelong sort of data analyst, programmer, writer, researcher, and he's working on a problem very near and dear to my heart, very near and dear to the hearts of many of my listeners and many red-blooded Americans who like to fix their own vehicles and drive things they want to drive and are facing mounting cost of living increases because of particular problems with how American manufacturing is structured and regulated. And this gentleman has a novel solution rooted in the Constitution and analyzing how that particular clause in the Constitution has played out over the last 200 plus years. And he has a very, very, very interesting pathway to fixing up some major problems in our country and to giving us back our choice and freedom as Americans. So, the other voice you're about to hear today, please welcome to the show, Mr. Roleigh Martin.
Thank you, Gord.
Yeah, sir. So I bumped into you on Twitter, I don't know, I guess a couple months ago now. You had written this article about trucks and the truckers who drive them not being allowed to purchase older equipment, or it's being very difficult to do so. And then in that article, you highlighted this thing called the patent clause, which I thought was very interesting. And I read it, and we've been in communication ever since. And I've come to find out that you have a book proposal, and you've very graciously sent me an advanced copy of your book to have a read and analyze, and it's all very interesting to me. But before we get into that, can you tell me and my listeners a little bit about your life story, because you've done some pretty cool stuff?
Well, I, I'm 76 years old, and there's two types of people that make it in writing. Some people, they're extremely focused on one thing all their life, and they just really excel at that. The other people that I find more interesting look at the whole picture, and they cover a lot of different grounds, and they never really get successful in any one ground because they change their interest to another ground. And that's my story. So here I am at age 76, living on Social Security and spending all my time writing. But it's been an interesting life. I In the 1990s, I created one of the first electronic magazines before a browser even existed. It was on diskette. And I had the Nobel Prize winner Milton Friedman and Ben Bova and Jerry Purnell and a lot of famous writers back then. We had about 30 different writers, and we went for 5 years. But it was before the internet really got off with the browser and stuff like that. So I just didn't make any money on it. And after 5 years, I gave up on it. But it was my first.
You were a man ahead of your time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I'm in with the patent clause problem. I'm a man ahead of the constitutional lawyers. But I use a lot of legal AI engines, and some of the engines are trained not to hallucinate, because one of the biggest problems of AI is hallucination. It's like they want to please you and agree with you. And it's like the companies want you to feel like you got a new friend, and you'll pay the monthly subscription costs. But some AIs, their job is to win in court, and they can't hallucinate because in court they'll be torn apart. And the interesting thing about running this patent clause problem through legal AI engines is it's rock solid. They do admit this particular issue I'm pushing has never been put before the courts, but all of the grounds of it are flawless. There's 38 Supreme Court cases backing the argument that I'm making.
Yeah, and I as I read through your book, you know, people often get accused of being cranks, or being quixotic windmill tilters because they don't like some particular thing about society or phenomenon or a change, and maybe we're all just reactionaries. But your argument is very well researched and goes back, like, basically right back to the Constitution, And again, you've cited all of these previous Supreme Court cases. You've gone like through multiple sides of the issue, application, how it all can work. The latest figure for your book proposal, which is not published yet. What did you say it was? Like something like 700 pages?
It's 777 pages with about 150 pages of footnotes.
A gambler's number.
Yeah.
Well, you've certainly done your homework, sir. So, it's May 31st, 2026 when we're recording this, and the average American is going through a very hard time now with economics, and this is not just about Trump or Biden or anything. A lot of this stuff goes back a long way. The chickens from 2008 have yet to come home to roost, amongst other problems. And we're also under what many people would call a crushing regulatory regime, which just is antithetical to the sort of principles of freedom and open markets that this country was supposedly founded on. And that crushing regulatory regime runs into these principles and has overruled them, according to your book. And we can see that all around us. In your book, you cite the $75,000 Ford pickup truck of today, and how that's basically an untenable proposition to most normal working class people. You are the administrator of some kind of Twitter group called Make America Livable Again, or what's it called?
Yeah, it's actually it's the full name is Doge MAGA Maha Amplified, and then it has a paragraph of what it does. But the ending sentence is "Make American Livable Again," Mala. And the importance of patent clause. A lot of people think, "Why are you into the patent clause?" It's what you realize that the purpose of the patent clause is we give inventors protection for limited times. That's what the clause says. For limited times, we'll give an inventor a monopoly, that we use the force of guns of the government to come after anybody trying to remanufacture the invention while it's protected. But in exchange for that temporary protection and monopoly, the other half of the bargain is that it goes into the public domain afterwards for the people, the public domain, to be able to benefit from the invention just like the inventor. So that's the second half of the patent clause, which has been forgotten about. People, all the experts focus on the 20 years the patent is active, but they ignore the benefit after the patent expires. And that commons that happens after the patent expires is called the expired patent commons. But the regulatory state since 1970 has prevented any expired patents benefiting the commons. There is no ability to remanufacture or whatnot for 58% of commerce, which basically includes all motorized equipment and vehicles, including planes, all that stuff. And what's interesting is that 90 nations allow remanufacturing. And in those nations, they're mostly poorer nations, their cost of vehicles and trucks is about 1/3 less than of what we pay. So the trucks the semi-truck tractors, they're about $80,000, $60,000. That would be $250,000 here in America, and that's in American dollars. It's if we had remanufacturing going on in these sectors of the economy, you could buy a 1999 Peterbilt for about somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000, and
brand new. You're not buying a used 1999 Peterbilt with all rebuilt, remanufactured. It's as if it came off the line directly.
yeah, in fact, even better than that, because the benefit of the expired patent commons is when you remake something, you don't have to remake it exactly the way the F-150 was made if you're making a pickup truck. you can take the best expired patents and put them together. So, like in 2026, we got access to patents that were active from 2005 onward. And and earlier, they've expired now in 2026. But the backup cameras that you see in cars, they're available to take, say, from Audi, which had them. You could rebuild trucks with the best expired patent technology that was available. So you could have a much neater 1999 Peterbilt than what was available in 1999.
Or you could build a really sweet 1985 Model 359 Peterbilt, which is just absolutely gorgeous and pleasing to the eye and objectively beautiful in every way, and then have everything underneath it be from 2005 if you want. Right?
Well, didn't you say that the 1999 platform is exempt
Well, I'm
from?
saying if people wanted the newer stuff, right? So, like,
Yeah,
I'm obviously there are reasons why people want the 1999 stuff regards trucking,
yeah,
to get around the surveillance tech mandates. But I'm just saying, like, if you want to build, you can sort of the idea is that you can mix and match with all
yeah,
of these expired patents, and American manufacturing, right? Like, in the history of it, a lot of manufacturing got shipped off to places like China and Vietnam and Mexico and all these other countries, and the sort of heartland was gutted. And we all know about the Rust Belt, and we all know about the cultural and civic and social and economic decay that's taken place ever since. If we had a more robust, if someone took your idea on this patent clause thing to court and then made the rule of the law of the land that people could remanufacture all of this equipment, whether it's like chainsaws, airplanes, buses, cars, trucks, whatever is what was the ratio? You said it's something like 58% of
yeah,
products are not able to be like these patents are still effectively in place.
yeah. 58% of economy involves motorized vehicles and tools and motorized machinery that is regulated by safety and energy laws. And these laws, they have a ratcheting effect. Even the original makers of these products couldn't remanufacture these products because they have a ratcheting effect, also called an anti-backsliding regulation. So if you were to try to remake anything from 1999, they have to follow the safety and energy standards in effect in 2026, not those in effect in 1999. Now, that itself is a violation of equality under the law. During the time that the patent was active, it was exempt from any newer energy and safety laws. They were grandfathered in. Well, expired patents are entitled to the same grandfather exemptions, but they're not getting them. And I suspect the lobbyists that helped write these laws did not want to see cheap remanufactured competition coming onto the marketplace, because these lobbyists saw what happened in the calculator industry. Because if you can, for those my age, they remember how expensive calculators were in the 70s. They were $300 to $400. And then after the key patents expired in the 1990s, all these high-end Texas Instruments and HP calculators dropped to under $50. And there was clones of these calculators under $10. Uh, that is something the lobbyists saw. We don't want that happen to trucks. We don't want to see that happen to cars. So they pass these energy and safety laws with no grandfather exemptions.
Right. So in your book proposal, you describe this as a wall, right? So actually maybe before we get to that, let's get back to the sort of the seed of all this, right? You keep talking about this patent clause and how one half of it is being ignored, which allows for the erection of this wall, this regulatory wall that prevents quote unquote backsliding and remanufacturing. So lay out for my listeners what the patent clause is, where it is in the Constitution, and how that's played out in history.
Okay, so the patent clause is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8. It's also called the intellectual property clause. It handles copyrights and patents. And it says that Congress is able to pass laws that for limited times that provides a monopoly for inventors. I don't have the exact phrase memorized. I can bring it up. Let me bring it up real fast. But the key words are limited times. And so the regulatory wall allows these items to never be remanufactured for infinity, which violates everybody's understanding of English. Infinity is not a limited time. It's that simple.
The limited times thing. This is where we get the 20 years, right? Like the limited times means you are granted this monopoly and then it's over.
Yeah. And the phrase is to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. That's the entire clause. But the second half of the clause is what happens after limited times.
Yeah, so when the patent expires, it's supposed to enter as what you call it, the public domain, the commons, where
Yeah.
anybody can take this invention and improve upon it, build it themselves, offer it on the market. Thank you, inventor. You got your 20 years. Hopefully, you made some money and built up a nice kitty and go invent something else. Now everybody else gets to use your invention.
Yeah. And until 1970, we had the right to remanufacture. Now, what's interesting is that very little remanufacturing was going on in automotives and trucks and that. But what's also interesting is because the manufacturers knew it could happen, they were very cost efficient. And so cars were much cheaper in relationship to the median income in 1970 than it is today. It is a difference of 100% in relationship to the median income of I when you go back that far, not too many women work. So I use the male American worker. And the cars have doubled in relationship to the ratio of median income by 100% more. So that's one reason is the manufacturers have no fear of remanufacturing of their inventions after the patents expire. So they can jack up the price any way they want.
Right, and but some of that price increase is not merely just profiteering. A lot of it is regulatory compliance and extra crap they have to keep putting on the vehicles, especially now. One of the bugaboos people like me and my associates um, complain about is all of the excess baggage mandated by the state onto vehicles and other equipment. Farmers. There's a big debate right now about something called right to repair, where farmers, specifically with John Deere tractors, were finding that they were not allowed to service their own equipment anymore. Computer systems that operate their tractors have become too complex and required specialty knowledge, which the farmers could acquire, but if they acquired it, they were breaking some new copyright law that John Deere was enforcing. Like, you have to bring the tractor back to us and we will fix it for you at the price we determine. And the farmers started fighting back, and it's turned into this whole thing called right to repair, which overlaps with a number of other issues, including and people are getting wise to this. That cars and trucks and equipment are just fantastically expensive, and a lot of it has to do with emissions control systems, with safety systems, with all of these, like with big trucks, especially front collision avoidance, lane maintenance. They're basically trying to enforce vehicles to almost drive for you, with the eventual goal of replacing human drivers entirely. And all of those systems cost a lot of money to build, a lot of money to maintain. And then, of course, there's the subscriptions that come with all of this shit from the software developers that run the stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's a significant part of this cost inflation.
Well, and yeah, you're absolutely right about that. What's interesting about the expired patent comments, if we could remanufacture, and we're not trying to get a law passed. The issue is the Constitution says we can do this already. The issue is to have the Constitution slap down these regulatory agencies and say you've gone too far. You've taken upon yourself powers that Congress doesn't even have the power. Congress doesn't have the power to allow patents to last forever in time. So, and everything the government does is granted to them by Congress. So Congress cannot give somebody else more power than it has. And that's the violation there.
How have these violations survived, as you put it in your upcoming book, since 1970? This sort of regulatory regime, which has, interfered with the limited times half of the patent clause. Can you sort of lay out how that works?
Yeah, I have a whole chapter. It's basically why is this case fileable all of a sudden? Because until the Chevron Supreme Court holding was declared in 2024, the Supreme Court would never interfere with regulatory agencies. They'd give them the benefit of the doubt. But in 2024, they stopped doing that. And now they look at basically constitutional powers and intent, and they look a little bit deeper, and they don't let the regulatory agencies get away with that BS.
Right. So Chevron deference, in essence, what you're saying is that that ruling makes a filing possible to try and rectify this limited times part of the patent clause.
Yeah. And then, of course, the ruling was in 2024, but any new ruling takes a while to kind of flesh itself and actually be fully utilized in courts. So other things happen. And so basically 2026 is the first year that it's like all the stars aligned and it's a perfect symmetry of the legal universe to take down the regulatory state via use of Supreme Court holdings.
Right. Can you talk about some of those holdings and sort of trace some lines for us to where this is applicable to all the things we're talking about?
Yes. I don't have this all memorized.
Well, there's so much though, hey.
But the anybody listening to this agreement, I mean this podcast, they can go onto your Substack article, and Gord will give you a way to contact me. But I'll allow anybody to have a review copy of any of the chapters that interest them. I can't give out the book, but I could give out review copies of chapters. The most interesting three chapters are: one is why is this fileable all of a sudden? And then the two ways to attack the problem is one is on the violation of the patent clause, and the other one is on the violation of the Fifth Amendment, the takings clause. So those three chapters are the most interesting. And what happened is, and that chapter one, it kind of lays it out really nice. It gives a nice slideshow of all the major breakthroughs in SCOTUS holdings. I'm going to quickly bring that up. Okay, so on the patent clause, some of the key holdings, one goes back to 1882. It's James V. Campbell, and it's basically saying that patents are property. The federal government cannot appropriate them without just compensation. The other one is 1898, McCormick Harvesting versus Altman. And it says, once issued, a patent is a patentee's property. It is not able to be revoked by the agency. 1945 was Scott Paper versus Marcalis. Reservation of rights after patent expiration runs counter. I mean, that the inventor owns it during the active patent period, And after the patent expires, the public owns it. It is still property protected against takings. Uh, Graham versus John Deere in 1966, Congress may not remove existing knowledge from the public domain. It is not for the government to just go and take whatever they want from the public domain. 1989 is Bonito Boats versus Thundercraft. When a patent expires, the design passes to the public domain, free for all to use. 1999 is Florida Prepaid versus College Savings. Patents are a species of property. Some people in the past used to think property was something that you could stand on, but it's more than just that. 2015 is Kimball versus Marvel. The unrestricted right to make or use the article passes to the public when the patent expires. So those are the key patent clause holdings. But the takings clause has a set of holdings that are interesting. 1984 is Ruckel House versus Monsanto. And it basically is talking about the difference between a partial taking or a full taking, and the government is restrained from being able to do too much. But the point of the matter is the patent clause is a full taking. We're 100% blocked from remanufacturing, which is the most severe form of taking. And the taking clause in the government allows the government to take, but they have to do just compensation. However, the cost of the taking of these expired patents is $22 trillion. The government doesn't have the ability to pay that money. So what?
Especially when we're pushing $40 trillion in debt right now. Can you explain that $22 trillion in takings? People might be like, their heads might be buzzing when they hear that. Like, break that down.
Well, basically, we're talking about a buildup of loss from 1970. So it's not all in one year. And the other thing is that where you look at countries where remanufacturing is going on, the manufacturer is selling something brand new, newly invented, newly patented. Typically, they have to lower their prices on an average 15% when they have to compete against remanufactured items. So you basically take, at a minimum, 15% of all the items blocked and see what is the value of that money. It's a lot. For the people in the lower half of the income brackets, if remanufacturing existed, they would probably buy all newly remanufactured stuff, hardly anything brand new patented. So for them, the taking is over 50%.
Right. And when you say buy, so I want to introduce a nuance here, right? And this is something that I think is very germane to people on, in the working class in America, people on lower incomes, because everyone's talking about the widening gap between the haves and have-nots. This is not just like some Bernie Sanders socialist fantasy. It is a reality. Everybody sees it. This is part of Trump being reelected under this populist thing. Like, people are sick and tired of this crap. And one of the problems is nobody can afford new equipment, right? You talk about that $75,000 F-150. I can't afford that. I've got a 1998 Tacoma sitting out here that's almost 30 years old, and it's dying and needs more work than I can afford to put into it, right? But if when people do go and get new stuff, it's often financed, right? The automotive manufacturers now make more money on selling you the vehicle rather than actually making it, because what happens is you become essentially a slave to credit, right? And when you have a nation of people enslaved to credit to get one of the more basic tools you need in our society, where if you live out in the country or you're far away, everybody kind of needs a car. We can argue about whether or not that's good, or the utopians can say we all have to move to the cities and live like bugs on buses, although that's not happening with most red-blooded Americans. At the end of the day, people need cars, right? And we are being basically enslaved to the credit system in order to buy new vehicles, because the new vehicles cost too much money. And a remedy to that is being able to buy, patent expired, remanufactured stuff. Like if it was up to me, I would buy like a 1983 Chevette four banger with a 5-speed manual transmission. They were great little cars. They were super cheap, and I can't buy one now, and nobody offers you one. I think there's only something like less than half a dozen models of vehicle on the market right now that are under $25,000, brand new.
Yeah. And the other thing that is sadly gone because of the regulatory state is manual stick shift vehicles. They were a lot of fun to drive.
Yeah, and I like how you laid that out. Like the manual stick shift thing. This is a big debate I have with my friends on Twitter and just in general. Is that, like, a lot of people say, well, the car that you go to some new vehicle, you go to a dealership and they'll say, well, nobody wants it, which is bullshit. A lot of people want it, or they'll say, oh, it has to do with the environment. They want the automatic transmission for, to satisfy CAFE standards, which is partially true. But one of the interesting things you mentioned is that the implementation of this autonomous future and all of the controls being taken away from the driver in order to facilitate front collision avoidance and lane control does not work if you have a manual transmission. It only works if there's an automatic, or if the vehicle is electric, which is a direct drive to wheel system, right? A manual transmission does not comport with the plans the overlords have for us.
Well, that's one of the beauties that I like about the remanufactured future America is because the ordinary person could basically, by voting with their dollars, I would imagine over 50% of newly made cars would be newly remade 20-year-old patent expired cars. And so the
with no
dream of these overlords.
with no GPS, no screens, and no surveillance technology,
Yeah, exactly.
and none of this garbage, pre-autonomous tech, which they keep mandating onto us, as they say, for safety, when it's really about control.
Well, but you could still have what I do like about is backup cameras. I like the ability to see what's behind me as I'm backing up the car. But you could have that because that technology came out in about 2003, 2004. So in a remade vehicle, you could have that. And the same with people like listening to Pandora and stuff like that and Audible on their smartphone. You could have Bluetooth patents have expired now, so you could have that. You don't need to have CarPlay or Android CarPlay to be able to enjoy whatever's on your phone. You could do that with just plain old Bluetooth or wired cables. So you could have uh, a car that escapes all that stuff. What's really atrocious about modern vehicles is that you're paying with your own money to have a 24/7 prosecuting attorney inside your vehicle, watching everything you do, recording everything you do. That is insane. Talk about self-incrimination.
Yeah, it's oh no, it's 1984 surveillance panopticon is what it is, and it's the
Yeah.
regulatory regime bringing it to us in quote unquote the name of safety when it's got nothing to do with it. It's about being able to assign blame when this stuff ends up in court in our very litigious society, and insurance companies get involved, and it gets real messy real quick. The reasoning and the logic behind this, but if you're I hate to use this overused phrase, but like a red-blooded American that appreciates your own privacy, your own agency, and your own freedoms and liberties, the technology that's mandated into vehicles today is against all of that.
Well, the one reason I asked you to be the forward author is among all the occupations, the occupation most damaged by the violation of the patent clause is semi truck drivers. And your book lays out the case fantastically well. I mean, everybody listening to this audio should definitely get The End of the Road by Gord.
Thank you, sir. No, it is a good book, and I mean it's doing a lot of different things, but yeah, there's something about honor, right? Like if you're a guy like me or anybody else, and I know lots of people with more experience than me, that got 40 years behind the wheel, 40 years plus, been and done as much as I have, if not more. There's plenty of us around. When your employer comes to tell you, well, you have to drive this truck and it has to have a driver facing camera in it now, and you say, well, I've never been in a collision before and I've never hurt anybody, why do I have to have this camera, why do I have to have this electronic logging device? And they say, well, because of other people. So like, you're being punished for other people's stupidity, you're being punished because of concerns of a litigious regime of which you have not contributed to any of the problems that caused it to arise, right? Like, you should not be punished. Regulation is punishment of the innocent because of the sins of the few, and it becomes inescapable when all of the technology platforms, all of the vehicle platforms come mandated with this stuff. And like, even your employer doesn't have a choice about it, and all you're left with is to try and keep 30 and 40-year-old vehicles alive, which can be done, and some people do that, but like, they're in a very tiny minority. Having this patent expired remanufactured trucks on the road would be like giving a finger back to the people, basically trying to tell you that your experience doesn't matter, your skill and craft and competency, your entire life on the road does not matter, driver, you will comply. And to which I say, in which my book says, maybe not in so many words, is fuck that.
And I have two chapters, one on the surveillance premium and the other one on the last human driver. And the beauty of the remanufacturing is that the truckers, if they're able to buy a 1998 newly remade Peterbilt for $70,000, $60,000, you're going to be able to compete trucking wise against the cost of these robotic driven trucks. You're going to be a more cost efficient solution in the marketplace.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you would be anyways, even with like a sort of newer truck, because at first, I think the autonomous people are really overselling their stuff, right? So I wrote about this in my book. I just had an article about this put out in the Blaze. The autonomous systems developers have been very misinformative and disingenuous about the costs associated with their platforms, right? Like, they still need the truck, right? Like, Kodiak does not build a truck. Aurora does not build a truck. They build the system that goes on to the existing truck and then makes it driverless. But the costs of doing that right now make them way more expensive than a normal truck. Now, in time, with more manufacturing and economies of scale, will they get that cost down? Absolutely. Will it become competitive with human drivers? I'm not so sure, because it's all subscription as a service, right? And they're explicit about this in their investor reports. Like, they're explicit about this to the customers that they're hoping to court. Like, you don't just buy the Kodiak driver system and then that's it. You have to have a subscription to Kodiak's operating system and all its updates and all of its overseeing. And they tell you that the savings versus a human driver is only between 25 and 40%. But that's in the best case scenario, right? That's without anything else the government might insert there as a safety thing. That's without, if these companies don't have cost overruns, if their guesses about what those savings are actually correct, right? Like, I don't know that these autonomous systems will in fact be competitive or cheaper than human driven trucks, and if they do, it's not going to be for a while yet.
Yeah, but definitely it would be a lot farther in the future if you could buy 1998 newly
Well,
remade
no,
Peterbilt.
exactly, and I mean, your point still stands, right? If your initial cost outlay to get into trucking, the biggest piece of that is the equipment itself, right? So
Yeah.
if you go to Peterbilt and say, I want a new 589, but it's got the Aurora driver on it or the Kodiak driver on it or whatever system, and they say that's $400,000, or maybe in the future they get it down to 350 or 300 or 275. But if you're an owner operator that's a human and you can go to the remanufactured Peterbilt dealer, or let's say, so there's already there used to be this industry which you read about in my book called glider kits, right? So you could go to a company called Fitzgerald Gliders. They were the most famous amongst them, and there was a bunch. And Fitzgerald would take, you know, a 2002 brand new or a 2010 brand new Peterbilt off the line, but there was no engine in it, no transmission, sometimes not even rear ends, the differentials, right? And you would take your, if you're a buyer who wants to remanufacture it, you could rebuild your motor, get a new transmission somewhere else, and then buy the glider kit from Fitzgerald, and then they would put the motor and everything in it for you so that you could get around the emissions mandate stuff. Well, the government comes along and says, well, at one point they said each glider manufacturer is only allowed to sell 300 per year. So they tried to clamp down on it, and then they just killed it entirely because they said it was no longer the EPA regulations were no longer based on the year of the engine. It was based on the year of the chassis. So they basically killed the glider kit industry. But those people are still around. So like if you go to Fitzgerald Glider or some other company that takes this, you know, remanufacturing possibility with the clause you're talking about, and they've already got all the tooling, they've already got all the people, they could probably start doing this fairly quickly. And so yeah, you go to Fitzgerald and you say, hey man, I want like a 1998 Peterbilt with a 1998 C15 in it, or a Detroit engine, or whatever you want. And it does, like, let's say your numbers are true, it only costs 80 or 100 grand. Even if it's 150, that's half the cost of a $300,000 autonomous truck. So you're already beating them by 50% right out of the gate.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that your book brings out really nice is female truck drivers. They're basically like being sexually violated with this camera technology in the cab. You would think that the women's rights group would be against this.
Yeah,
Hostile.
I'm actually friends with a bunch of those ladies. There's an organization called Real Women in Trucking that was founded by this lady named Desiree Wood. I'm sure she's going to listen to this. Hi, Desiree. And you know that she and her colleagues advocate for women's rights in trucking, and a number of them include, you know, these cameras where there's been numerous instances where, you know, women have, you know, heard all of these stupid comments from the safety departments at their trucking industry, commenting on their looks and stuff because they're being looked at by this camera. And then there's accusations that the camera gets turned on when they're like undressing in the bunk. And then there's also there was a poll taken about inward facing cameras, and like, you know, the biggest the biggest group who objected to it were women, because they have this legitimate, like, hey man, like, you know, all these staff looking at me through this camera. And then, you know, there's also other problems with training too, right? Like the team training model, which is separate from our conversation, but like they do have a legitimate objection to the surveillance technology. And man, I other than them, nobody else is making the case for this. Like you would think, you know, the world's feminist movements would be all over this, but I don't hear very much about it other than from Desiree and her friends.
Just out of curiosity, are there cameras inside the bunk room of a sleeper cab?
No, it's just sitting on the dashboard, or it's mounted on the camera. But the problem is when you get out of the driver's seat, the bunk is like right here. So unless you close the curtains or something, and in some smaller models, it's hard to get dressed and do stuff. Like the sleeper on a truck is usually fairly compact. You can get bigger ones, but you know, it's looking in you. And I mean, never mind that. There's the whole ELD thing too, right? The ELD mandate that came out in 2017. The truck is being tracked all over the place. It literally breaks your Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizure. And when the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association was fighting this in court and trying to like get the ELD mandate, you know, terminated before it started, the government basically cited something called the pervasively regulated industries clause, which says that if any industry that is already regulated heavily for safety concerns can just regulate you some more based on the fact you're already regulated. It's like a circular logic. And on that note, I'm actually kind of curious to know if your proposal, like, you do want people to take this case on now that we've had Chevron deference, and you cite all of these other cases. And what happens when a case goes to court? Like, let's say it gets to the Supreme Court to grant people, their limited time, the other part of the bargain. We are allowed to remanufacture things to the year standard, the model year. So I want to build that 1998 or 1999 Peterbilt completely with everything on it from that era, from that time, at that time of being regulated. What happens when it goes to court and the lawyers for all of these scumbag agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency and NHTSA and DOT, who are working in service of their corporate masters and the safetyism enthusiasts of the world, come to you and say, pervasively regulated, too bad. Like, what you have some arguments about against the people that are already going to, you've predicted are going to, rightly predicted, are going to come at you. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, basically, it's the 14th Amendment was restraint on state governments to violate, to do unequal justice. But there is an equivalent thing at the federal level. I forget the exact SCOTUS case, but basically, the equality under the law requires that the expired patent domain owner of patents get the same grandfather exemption that the active patent holder had during the time. So because pre-1999 vehicles were exempt from all this surveillance stuff, the expired patents of pre-99 stuff should be treated the same for reasons of equality under the law, equal standing. That's it in a nutshell. But that's what is being sought after, is you allow remanufacturing to happen, and the energy and safety laws apply for a remanufactured item equal to the year the item was initially patented. Now, instead of letting the government make that decision, I'm advocating that it's independent engineering certification, so that they can't be captured by the regulatory state. So, and they would, if you're using multiple expired patent stuff, that's engineering certification would have to decide overall, this vehicle has to meet the energy and safety standards of 1998, 1997, or whatnot. But that's what's being asked for in the book, is allowing patents to go into the public domain and energy, engineering certification for grandfather clause.
Right. So what are the actual mechanics to get something like, is this something we can change through regulation, or does this have to go to court? Does somebody have to like try and actually remanufacture something and then wait for the government lawyers to come after them and then fight it out later in court? Like, what's the mechanics of how this works?
I'm glad you asked that. So people listening, if you go to x.com and then you look up my name, Roleigh with an O, Roleigh Martin, and it's all one word, .com. On my profile is on the far right, you have to kind of slide over, is articles. And I have 31 articles on the patent clause, and you can read up a lot more on it. But the one thing that I've done...
I'll share that link in the show notes, folks, so I'll make it easy for you. Carry on.
Okay. So the other thing is we need to have plaintiff groups with standing take this to court. And there's 19 plaintiff categories. And truck drivers are one, independent owner-operator truck drivers. Rideshare drivers is another plaintiff category. Sheriffs is a plaintiff category because they have to buy vehicles for their department. And they're considered almost like a governor, but a governor of a county. So they have standing in court. And of course, governors and attorney generals have standing as well. Indian tribes have standing, and Indian tribes do a lot of procurement. earth moving operators have standing, restaurant owners have standing. I have a listing of all the groups who have standing to challenge this. And I have a website where you can write letters to the associations representing these plaintiff categories. So, like in trucking, you can write letters to some major trucking agencies like the Western Trucking Association or the individual state trucking groups and show them how their industry and their members that they represent are being harmed by the patent clause thing. So we need more letters. And I recommend, I have a master's degree in sociology. A real letter with a stamp is paid attention more so than an email. So you'll get a better chance of having someone read your message. And the more people that do it. So if a trucking association gets 100 or 200 letters on the same topic, that it's a good chance that they'll pay attention to it. And all we need is one good plaintiff to take this to court. Ideally, it's better to have a handful of plaintiffs, one in one federal district, another in a different federal district, so that if you get a different ruling in one district and a different ruling in another district, that's called a circuit split. And the fastest way to get something to the Supreme Court is to have circuit splits. So that's why it's a good idea. And it would be good to have earth moving operators go to court, maybe in one circuit, and semi-truck drivers.
Is one of the groups you said that has standing to approach this, is one of those groups farmers?
Oh yeah, farmers.
Yeah, because the farm equipment industry is just like, that's the thing that breaks some of those guys, man. Like combine harvesters and various equipment they have to use is just astronomically expensive.
Yeah, I have a whole article on X and a chapter in the book on farmers. And basically, our food bill is drastically increased because of this. They have companies that sell tractors in India where remanufacturing is strong, and in America. John Deere has factories in both India and the United States. And the cost of a combine or a tractor is like 1/6 the cost. It's outrageously.
Is that mostly because of the difference in the price of labor, or because they're remanufacturing older designs?
Well, they're remanufacturing. I mean, first of all, it's some of this is kind of trade secret, but so what you can go on is assessment on or if they're ever taken to court. So in some of these factories, they've been taken to court and they've proved in court that everything they use is patent expired. So I don't know about tractor companies taken to court and using in their defense patent expired, but I do know about that with cars.
Right. So speaking of India, you mentioned a bunch of other countries allow remanufacturing. Let's dig into that a little bit and see how it actually functions in those places. Can you give us some examples?
Okay, well, there's 90 countries that allow the selling of remanufactured items, but the biggest countries doing remanufacturing is India, China, Iran, Uganda, and a couple other countries. I think maybe Egypt as well. But China and India are the two biggest. And one of the things I'm recommending in the group is that if the Supreme Court holds that remanufacturing is allowed, we need to protect American industry from totally collapsing with the importing of all these Chinese and Indian remanufactured goods. So I recommend on a constitutional angle, we allow remanufacturing again with grandfather exemptions. But then I'm recommending from a political standpoint that import restrictions or tariffs are applied to foreign remanufacturers so that the American industry can come up strong in remanufacturing.
Right. So, but those tariffs prevent that stuff from coming here now, and you're suggesting that they should stay in place in order to pull off this remanufacturing resurgence here.
Yeah, yeah. But that's a political thing, whereas the main emphasis is a patent issue, which is all constitutional and legal. There's no politics in that.
Right. So, have you been talking to anybody else about this? I mean, obviously, you've got this huge sort of public facing group on Twitter X. Um, I can't be the only person who's expressed any interest in that, given the sort of gravity of what your idea around the patent clause proposes. Like, what sort of feedback have you gotten thus far?
Well, I've talked to some lawyers, and the interesting thing is, lawyers, they say, gosh, I never thought about that, but you're right. So it's amazing how invisible this problem is. And I have a whole chapter. Did you look at that chapter? Why did this escape everybody's attention for 55 years?
I have been unable to get to it, sir. Very busy life over here, but please lay it out for us. I have an idea. I think I have a pretty good notion of what it is, but please.
Okay, so the reasons why this has gone on hold up. There's from 1989. There's a classic political science paradigm called the bootleggers and Baptists, and it's basically where the manufacturers join up with the environmentalists, and the manufacturers don't want to see remanufacturing happen because it's going to hurt their bottom dollars. And so they line up with environmentalists, and their only concern is, putting an end to industry, basically. Uh, and so they join up together to stop allowing remanufacturing happen. And a lot of them probably don't know that that's actually what's happening. Their focus is, energy and safety. The interesting thing about semi truck drivers is that truck engines were incredibly uh, minimal pollution by the 1999, before Clinton signed the law where the DPF went into existence.
Yeah, no, the thing is that most of the emissions reductions that they've been trying to get for the last 25 years have been marginal. Like, most of the reductions had taken place before they started mandating things. So as usual, the government and their mandates are late to a party that was already mostly over.
Oh yeah, exactly. And so I have a whole chapter on the environmental concern, and I am a lifetime member of the Sierra Club and the Adirondack Mountain Club, and I was an executive officer of the Sierra Club in Northern Nevada. I was a treasurer and a hiking group trainer and leader. So I'm very familiar with their environmental concerns. But the main thing is there needs to be consideration for the lower half of society. And it's outrageous that basically American living is not affordable anymore. And it's all because of this patent clause problem. You allow remanufacturing, and the cost of living in America, at least for the bottom half, is going to drop in half. And that is amazing. Okay, so I talked about the bootleggers and Baptists. The
Profiteers and climate alarmists writ large.
Yeah, well, I have six forces. The first force is the corrupt ecosystem, and that's a circle of lobbyists, agencies, campaign contributions, and manufacturers. The third, so that's the two forces. There's the institutional blind spot. All the groups that would normally be able to help, they're looking at the active phase of patents. So all your patent law professors and all that, they're looking at that, or they're only concerned about copyright and bringing back Mickey Mouse, which is nice, but the patents, to me, I think are more important. So there's the institutional blind spot. there's the doctrinal floor thing where you couldn't have done anything about the problem anyway until the Chevron came along in 2024. So what was the point of even thinking about the problem since nothing could be done about it? Then there's moral acquiescence, and that is, it could be lawyers or whatnot. They could get a glimpse that the problem's there, but they realize they'll lose tenure in their university or they'll lose their law license if they go against the system. And definitely pushing for remanufacturing is going to go against the system. I think you and I can agree on that. And then there's the last force, which is, it's called rule-induced behavior, game behavior. Wow, your daughter's really
Yep, even came outside. I tried to set up my podcast studio outdoors to make sure we could pull it off, but the Rugrats found me.
But it's a combination of all those things as to why it's gone unnoticed in 55. I didn't notice it until March of 25. And after I noticed the problem, it's obsessed my life. I've done 31 long articles on that. I got 2.5 million readers of those articles. So
yeah, well, as they used to say on the old GI Joe cartoon for kids, knowing is half the battle. You remember that?
Yeah.
Well, now we know.
And the more people hear about this, a lot of people remember what happened in the price of calculators. Another good example is bicycles. Bicycles have never had a blockage for remanufacturing. And if you bought the best ultralight bicycle in 2004, it was at that time, about $3,500. You can buy a remanufactured duplicate of that bicycle for $1,100 now.
Oh, incredible. It's funny how it's certain industries, right? Like I want to get back to this 58% number. Why is it that there's 58% that's the patent expiry is walled off by the regulatory state, but then there's the 32% that it's just a free for all and anybody can do whatever they want, as it should be.
Well, basically, it's wherever energy and safety come into play. And you would think bicycles with the safety, but the federal rules on bicycles are pretty minimal. It's basically having a reflector. So, but there's no energy, there's no exhaust or emissions or anything like that with bicycles. So bicycles have been exempted. Calculators, there's virtually no energy consumption to be worried about with calculators. And yeah, but if it's anything with a motor in it that has emissions, that uses fuel, it's part of the blocked category. Same with tools that use fuel, lawn mowers. Oh, that's one of the plaintiff categories is landscaping groups.
Yeah, no, what's funny is I was just fixing my lawnmower yesterday. It was starting to like sputter and die on me, and I'd already, I'd changed the oil and the spark plugs last year. I look after my equipment, and so it needed a fuel filter and a fuel pump, and the filter was $9 and the fuel pump was 20, and like bing bang boom, I fixed it myself. And I want cars and trucks and other things that we use to be as simple to maintain and as cheap to maintain as my lawnmower. Maybe not so much, obviously a truck, there's going to be, more complex and bigger parts and they're going to be more money, but like, you understand what I'm saying? Like,
oh yeah.
There's this idea of ownership, right? And my friend Brandon talks about this a lot. He's a kind of writer on the side, and he's a diesel mechanic, and he works for a gas station maintenance company right now. But this idea of ownership, like if you go and buy a piece of equipment, a tool, something you use, and you can't fix it yourself reasonably, you can't maintain it yourself reasonably, if it requires subscription to the cloud in order for the thing to operate, do you really own it? Is it really yours? Can actual ownership in our, our broadest understanding of that term even apply if you can't do anything to it, and if the government dictates all of the terms of your quote unquote ownership of that piece of equipment or tool?
Well, that's an interesting thing. What about patent expired software? Why not have a patent expired cloud service?
Oh boy. Oh boy. What happens with all these AI data centers if the patents for all of the technology in them expire? I mean,
Well,
the
the
considerate the considerations for what you're proposing are pretty far reaching.
oh yeah. Now I have a patent myself in artificial intelligence, but it's from the 1990s, believe it or not, and that patent has expired. So I was not the key inventor. I was just one on the team. I was a co-inventor. But patents do expire even in software. So you would think with the remanufacturing environment that you'll see patent expired competing subscription services dirt cheap.
Interesting. This has all been very interesting, Raleigh. So, um, your book, forgotten half of the patent clause.
Yeah, the forgotten half of the patent clause, subtitle How Federal Regulations Doubled the Cost of American Living and Rewrote the Constitution. Then there's a cover lead, How a Constitutional Bargain Was Canceled and How Restoring It Frees Buyers from Surveillance, Stops the Robotic Replacement of America's Drivers and Operators, and Returns the Joy of Operating Real Machines.
Yeah, that's a hell of a sublead, sir. Well, no, I mean, obviously you're speaking my language here and that of many other. America was always known as a land of tinkerers and inventors and people that would build their own things. And that's sort of gone by the wayside now. We've all become dependent on a small group of an ever smaller group of companies, and it's we like a lot of Americans rightly are skeptical of communism and centralized control and centralized government, but like we've given over so much of our manufacturing to these cartels who have parasitized themselves on a regulatory state to prevent any competition or prevent your freedom of choice as a consumer or builder or inventor. It's quite anti-American what's sprung up around us, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. And I'm glad to see that you're excited about this dream because I dream about it every day. I can just see how it would be. I have a whole chapter on where 5 years after the imagined Supreme Court holding, I have a 5 year forecast for what it would be for the plaintiff categories, what it would be like for truck drivers, farmers, earth moving operators. And then I have it for the ordinary household. And a common among all of them is they react with a take this attitude, and they're buying remanufacturing stuff like mad just to kind of push aside the ruling elite.
Yeah, no, I dig that attitude, and I respect it, and I respect why people hold it. So I have tried to hook you up with my own publisher, Creed and Culture. I don't know where that's going, but have you had any interest from anybody else in your book?
I sent out a pre-proposal to two different, a literary agent, and one other publisher, but I haven't heard back from them. They haven't even asked for a sample chapter, or I just sent out a query letter. Creed and Culture is my biggest hope right now. Um, the thing is, if you're writing about something that nobody else has heard about, it's kind of like salmon going up river.
Well, the thing is like, again, as we said earlier, you are a man ahead of your time, and some people don't like being the tip of the spear. They want to wait till somebody else clears the path, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to editorialize a little bit on this because there's another thing that's happened in trucking here in the last year or two is we've seen all of these collisions and incidents take place, and we have this problem with non-domiciled CDLs and the government basically allowing most of the third world to go trucking here, unvetted, untrained, and unregulated almost. And uh, the discussion around that when it started in earnest about 18 months ago, it was a very small group of people, right? It was me. There was another guy. There was some guys in Arkansas who started this advocacy group called American Truckers United, and a couple of other people scattered around. And we were the only ones that were sort of talking about the actual problem here. And I think other people were afraid because we live in this sort of woke tarded zeitgeist where any discussion of like immigration or ethnicity or identity is like, ooh, that's you're a far right racist if you talk about this. But because me, my friends at ATU, and some other folks were looking around saying, hey, we've got a problem here. And the problem is rooted in all of these loopholes in immigration law and, the migrant crisis, that was really exacerbated under Biden. All of these different states issuing CDLs to people that shouldn't have them. They have no training. They don't speak English. Because we were actually willing to talk about it several months later, OIDA gets on board. And then the American Trucking Associations, these lying sacks of shit nemesis of mine, they actually started praising Trump for the moves he made. But Trump didn't make those moves because of OIDA or ATA or anybody in government. It's because of myself and people like ATU saying something and getting some purchase with that message on social media, right? So what I'm saying to you is that like, you know, maybe we can't wait for mainstream publishing. Maybe we can't wait. Like we have to sort of generate this stuff on our own and take what we know is an existing concern. There's a whole lot of people out there I'm going to send this podcast to, Raleigh, that are going to resonate with this because they understand exactly what you're saying about the problem with overpriced vehicles, about the surveillance technology, about EPA mandates. They know about all of the different separate stuff, but they might not know about the remedy that you're proposing. And I think we just have to go directly to people.
Yeah. And by the way, I forgot to mention that it wasn't until basically Chevron that you could fight this in court. It used to be you had to break the law and become a criminal defendant to challenge a law. People remember 1955, Rosa Parks, a black lady getting on a bus and getting arrested, and then that ended up going to the Supreme Court. But basically, the Declaratory Judgment Act, which got its fullest strength in 2007, uh, allows a person to challenge the constitutionality of a law without becoming a criminal defendant. So before that, there was very little incentive because you would have had to create a factory that you're going to be arrested if remanufacturing, and then get arrested and losing all that money and then fight it in court. Well, nobody wants to do that.
No, that's a very good point, and I think again, a man ahead of your time. You're seeing all of the stars come into alignment before anybody has even looked up to notice that there are stars.
I like that. I like that saying.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to your book coming out. I'm going to continue to read what you've sent me. Um, I want this podcast to come out here very soon. I want people to understand what you're doing, and for your idea to get some purchase. And maybe I know some guys at the Trucking Association of New York. I'll send it to them, and uh, you
Now, did
know
you see that what my letter writing app does for that trucking? So is it aiming at the right trucking association? Did you see that in the email I sent you?
yeah, I think I know some guys at Tanny who are very receptive to things that I say.
Yeah.
Other state trucking associations, I don't know. I've never really talked to them. I know that there's a growing discord between the state level associations and the federal ATA. A lot of people are sick and tired of the ATA and know that they're a bunch of liars and hustlers and corporatist goons. So maybe with the state level guys, we'll be able to get somewhere. But I'm gonna send it to the guys at Tanny for sure.
Yeah, and so in your links that you give people, be sure and give them a link to the letter writing app so that
Yeah,
they can write trucking associations and that.
yeah, absolutely. Again, and it's not just like in our little world here. Most people understand that the federal government is gone, even with like Trumpism and this sort of populist resurgence. The walls around DC are nigh impenetrable, and the only change we're going to see is locally. Like we have to sort of lean into subsidiarity and lean into state level initiatives to get this stuff done. And if it ends up at the Supreme Court, all the better. But like again, as you say, the regulatory state since 1970 has got a full lock on the feds.
Now, the other thing for anybody in your audience who say they work for Tanny, the Trucking Association in New York, there are legal groups that their only purpose is to challenge unconstitutional laws. There's a Pacific Legal Freedom Group and the Institute for Justice and stuff like that. So if a good plaintiff category representative group like Tanny, if Tanny went to Pacific Legal Foundation or Institute for Justice with a solid case, and Hunt versus, I forget, it was a Supreme Court holding that said that trade group associations have standing in court to represent their members. And the beauty of that is that the individual members don't have to show up in court. So Tanny wouldn't require you to show up in court. So it makes it easier for the individual truck drivers if they belong to an association that fights for their constitutional rights.
Right? Yeah, I've heard of the Institute for Justice before, and I know some sort of libertarian guys that are associated with them, and I'll be sure to send this to them too. Raleigh, you've been very generous with your time. I'm I'm very fascinated with the work and research you've been doing. Do you have any final words here before we send our audience off?
Well, I think it's fair to your audience because I'm not a lawyer. I use legal AI engines to do this research. And I have been using, like, I have an AI patent, but I've been using AI to do this type of work now for about 2.5 years. That's why I got over 7.6 million views on my articles because I'm able to go way beyond my ability to do research as an individual. And the best engine for that I find is there's OpenCase and Claude. And Claude is what the Defense Department used to go to war against Iran. So it's amazing what modern AI can do. But again, the biggest problem with AI is hallucination. So you have to do a validation against validation. You have one engine validate the other, and you have one engine. Its only job is to check these type of errors. So when you're doing, most people who use AI, they're sitting in front of a chat bot asking a question, and then it answers back. On half the time, it's BS. But professional use of AI requires spending money. I mean, a good AI subscription is going to run $100 a month. But you can do amazing things with it. It's like the difference between someone who works with Legos and a professional contractor that has $100,000 worth of tools. So there's a big difference between what a person with a Lego kit can do and a professional contractor can do.
Right. Well, I appreciate that that you're putting the master's tools to use against the prison he's constructed around us. I appreciate that, sir.
Yeah, I have a section in the preface is using AI to thwart AI.
Yeah, no, it's great. Like I said, I've read a handful of the chapters of your book already, and I've been reading your articles, and I understand the sort of aim of your project here, and I want other people to understand it as well and to check out what you're up to. And I think you're at the tip of the spear of a possible remedy to many problems in America, and to the sort of freedoms and liberties that we should be enjoying that are walled off from us, and this sort of like injunction against the Constitution presented to us by the regulatory state, who are blocking us off from our right under the Constitution to remanufactured tools and equipment downstream of patent expiry. I think this is a interesting mechanism by which we can solve some issues in our society which have broad import. So Raleigh Martin, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Okay, one last question, Gordon. You're from Canada and then you were in Australia. What do you know about patent law in those two countries?
Not very much, sir. I'm not a lawyer, but I imagine that Canada and Australia have different problems. Relatedly, Australia used to have its own domestic car manufacturing industry. General Motors had plants there under the name Holden. Ford had a big factory near Melbourne in a place called oh geez, I'm having a brain fart now. But there's Geelong, yeah, the Ford Geelong plant, and Toyota had plants there, and they're all gone now. Australia basically regulated itself into penury. Australia has a rampant and rapacious and punishing nanny state. There's a sort of attitude amongst the ruling class there of maintaining the prison colony that the place started out as. Sorry, Australia bros, it's the truth. And I've been there a bunch of times. I really like the place. I love Australians. I think Australia is a beautiful country, has lots of potential, and it's hamstrung by its own government. So I'm not 100% sure where the patent stuff crosses into this, but regardless of that, they have a regulatory state there that the American government would probably like to import here to buttress what they already have.
The little that I know, I studied it for about an hour once, is if the patent uh, property is in the Constitution and it has the word limited times, people in those countries can fight it on constitutional grounds. But if it's nothing more than a legislative act and there's no constitutional backing of the patent clause, they'll have a harder time.
Yeah, again, I don't know. I'm not an expert on the on how the Australian federal government goes. I did study it. They tried to get rid of the monarchy. They tried to become a republic in 1999, and that failed. And I think it failed because of a number of questions of, all right, so how do we replace the Australian Constitution? And the Republican movement didn't have good enough answers. I think to a sort of majority of older people there that are loyal to the British Crown. As regards Canada, again, I'm not a lawyer in Canada, but I can only tell you that the political and regulatory environment in Canada is also stifling, and the Canadian government um, has unending resources to fight things that it doesn't like, even when they're wrong. I famously advocate for and write about the Freedom Convoy and some guys that were arrested uh, unjustly during that time, and the Canadian government has fought tooth and nail. They've been slapped down in court a couple of times over their invocation of the Emergencies Act, and that's now going to the Supreme Court because the Canadian government does not like being told that it's wrong, does not like being wrong. So I'm not 100% sure. Like if Mark Carney right now, the Canadian automotive manufacturing industry is very robust. One of the largest parts manufacturers in the world is called Magna, and they started in Ontario. And Canada was the beneficiary of the sort of, there was like a automotive pact between the United States and Canada, and now the Carney government is pivoting to China and importing Chinese electric vehicles, and the Canadian government has been it's been proven to have been infiltrated by Chinese Communist Party operatives, and they've interfered in our elections. And the Canadian government has done nothing about that. So I'm not 100% sure where like a remanufacturing patent expiration, patent time challenge goes in Canada. I don't know. And I suspect if it threatens either the automotive pact or the importation of Chinese stuff, it'll have a hard time.
Interesting. Well, Gordon, thank you very much. And if be glad to come back in the show anytime you want.
Yeah, and I'm gonna keep trying to help you get your message out and shop your book around. You may have to go the self publishing route. My friend Rob Carpenter's done a number of books that have been self published, so maybe he could help you with that if that's the way you end up going. But again, Raleigh, thank you so much for your time. I will have links to everything we've talked about here in the show notes. I don't have a marketing or advertising budget, so if you heard this and think it's interesting, please pass it around. Word of mouth is the best advertising, and it's all I can afford. And I think Raleigh is very deserving of it. And again, thank you so much, and way of the road.